Hi everyone, welcome back to another video in the Web Security Academy series. In today's video, we'll be covering lab number 4 in the Access Control Vulnerabilities module titled User Role Can Be Modified in User Profile. If you do not have an account on the Web Security Academy, you can get one by visiting the URL portswigger.net/websecurity and clicking on the sign up button. I already have an account and I am logged in, so to access the exercise, I'm going to click on Academy. Go down, select the learning path, go down again, select access control, and then go down one last time until you reach lab number 4, titled User Role Can Be Modified in User Profile. Alright, let's get started. This lab has an admin panel at /admin. It's only accessible to logged in users with a role ID of 2. Solve the lab by accessing the admin panel and using it to delete the user Carlos. You can log into your own account using the following credentials. So the target goal over here is to access the admin panel and use it to delete the user Carlos. And the way we're going to access the admin panel is by exploiting a broken access control vulnerability. And my guess is that this parameter over here is user controllable or client controllable. And so we should be able to change it and assign our regular user the role ID of the admin user. Okay, so let's access the lab. And while that loads up, you could see over here, this is the built-in browser in Burp. And so all the requests that are being made by the browser are being intercepted in my Burp proxy right over here. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to log into the account that we were given. The password was Peter. Hit login, and if we go to HTTP history over here, you could see it's a post request that is being performed. Let's make that a little bit bigger. So it's to the /login endpoint, and then it takes in 2 parameters, the username and the password of the user. I'm going to highlight this because this will be really useful when we're scripting the exploit. So that's step number 1. The next step is to figure out where the broken access control vulnerability is. So if we go to my account over here, it doesn't look like it's taking in any parameters other than the session ID of the user, which is normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my account again and see if it takes in any other parameters. And here we go. It takes in an ID parameter with the username of the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this to Repeater and see if this is the vulnerable parameter. Again, let's make this a little bit bigger. So you could see over here, it's a GET request. It takes in the username of the user. So what I'm going to do actually is just hit send. And since this is just a regular user, there's no admin panel over here. So if we look for admin, we get 0 matches. The next thing that I'm going to do is see if I could access, let's see, the admin ID if one exists. Hit send, and you get a 302 found. So if we follow redirection over here, and it still doesn't have the admin panel, so my guess is we reached the login page, and we did. So you could see over here, it tells you need to log in with your username and password. So that didn't work. It could be because this is not a real username in the system, or because this parameter is really not trusted from the client side. And so if you put in an ID other than the one that is assigned to the session cookie, it will automatically send you to the login page. So just to be sure, I'm just going to say administrator because that might be a valid username on the system. Hit send, and we still get a 302, and it sends me to the login page. So my guess is this parameter is not vulnerable, and there is still another parameter in the application that could potentially be vulnerable to broken access control. So if we go back over here, home just leads us to the home page, and then my account leads us to the my account page, and then we just have logout. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the email address, let's say test.test.ca, and click on update email just to see the type of parameters that are sent with this request. So it's a post request, and it's sent to this endpoint over here. So my account /change email. So what we're going to do is we're going to send this to Repeater and just view the request. So the endpoint over here is /my account /change email. And if we go down over here, you could see it only takes one parameter, and that's the email ID of the user that is tied to this session right over here. So at first glance, it doesn't look like it's vulnerable, but let's hit send to see the response. Now notice over here in the response, you get the username of the user that you want to change the email address. You get the changed email address, you get an API key, so that's interesting. And then you also get a role ID, and you could see over here the role ID of the user that we were given is set to 1. Now, we know from the exercise description that the role ID 2 is the one for the administrator user. So if there's a way to change this role ID to 2, I should have admin rights. Now, this is not a parameter that is passed in this request over here, but let's see if the application actually accepts this parameter. And if it accepts it, let's see if it allows it to be changed from the client side. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a comma, and then we're going to say role ID is equal to 2, and hit send and see if the application accepts it. Okay, perfect. So you can see over here it changed to 2, which means that the application allows the client to change the role ID to whatever the client wants, and that's what the broken access control vulnerability is. So if we reload this page over here, we should see the admin panel because now we have admin privileges, and we do. So we click on admin panel right over here. We hit delete. And here we go. We were able to delete the Carlos user and successfully complete the exercise. So if we go back to proxy over here, the request that was responsible for deleting the Carlos user is this one over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this one as well because it'll be useful when we're scripting the exploit. All right, so we successfully completed the exercise by manually exploiting the broken access control vulnerability. Now let's script it. If you're new to this channel and have no idea why I'm scripting the exploit, it's because at some point in your pen testing career, you're going to need to learn how to script exploits, and that's why we do it in every video. All right, so before we script it, let's list the steps that we need to perform in our script. So the first thing that we need to do is log in as the user that we were given. Next, we need to change the role ID of the user to 2. Which is the role ID of an admin user. And then we're going to access the admin panel and delete the user. All right, let's save that and start writing our script. As usual, the first thing we're going to do is import the requests library. Next, we're going to import the sys library, which is going to allow us to obtain parameters from the command line. And then we're going to import URL lib3. We're going to disable warnings from TLS certificates. So URL lib3 dot exceptions dot insecure request warning. This looks good. And then we're going to set our proxy setting. So I want all my requests to be sent to Burp first before they're sent to the application. And the reason I do that is because if the script is not working, I could view the request in my proxy in order to see what the issue is versus having to try and guess and debug the script itself. Okay, and then HTTPS traffic is also sent to HTTP 127.0.0.1 port 8080. All right, this looks good. Next step is to create our main method. And then I'm going to say def main. We're going to say if the length of the command line arguments is not equal to 2, then I need you to print the usage instructions because clearly the user doesn't know how to run the script properly. So we're going to say take in the command line argument and the URL, and the command line argument that we want to take in is the name of the script. So argv0. Next, I'm going to print example instructions. So example, and say www.example.com, and again, the name of this script. And since it was running correctly, I'm just going to exit the program. All right, this looks good. So if the user runs it incorrectly, it'll print these instructions right over here. Now, if the user does run it correctly, what we're going to do is we're going to create a session variable. So requests.session. And the reason we're creating a session variable is because when we log in, it'll assign us a session cookie right over here. And I want that session cookie to be maintained across all my requests. Because if you notice over here, we've got 3 requests to perform. The first one is going to give us the session cookie, and then I want the session cookie to be automatically added in my request for the second request and the third request. And that's why we're using the .session function right over here. Okay, next we're going to say URL is equal to sys.argv1. So we're taking it from the command line. And then we're going to call our function delete user, taking the session object and the URL. And what this function is going to do is it's going to perform all 3 steps and delete the Carlos user. All right, let's implement this function. So delete user as URL. The first step is to log in as the user that we were given. So the first thing that I need is the login URL. So that's the URL that we're taking from the command line. That's the endpoint to log into an account. So if we go down right over here, you could see over here it's a post request. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And the endpoint is this right over here. So let's copy that. Next, we need the parameters of this request. So if you go down over here, it takes in 2 parameters, the username and password. So what we're going to say is data login. And we're going to set the 2 parameters, which are username, set to the username that we were given, and password, set to the password that we were given. All right, this looks good. So we have everything that we need for this request. We've got the parameters and we've got the endpoint. So all we have to do right now is perform the request. So we're going to say r is equal to s.post, post because it's a post method. The URL is login URL. The parameters, so data is equal to data login. We're going to set verify to be equal to false because I don't want to verify TLS certificates, and proxies to be equal to proxies so that this request gets sent to my proxy just in case I need to debug it. Next, we're going to set the response to a variable called res, and we're going to say r.text. And we're going to say if logout is in the response, then that means that I've successfully logged in as that user, plus successfully logged in as the user that we were given. And if I don't get a logout in the response, that means my login was unsuccessful. So I'm going to print could not log in as the user that we were given. Okay, so let's assume that we were able to successfully log in as the user. The next step is to change the role ID of the user. And to do that, that was a separate request. So if we go to repeater, this was the request that we performed to change the ID of the user. So it takes in this endpoint over here. It's a post request, and it takes in the following parameters. And notice over here, the parameters are in JSON form. So we're going to have to implement that in our script as well. So first thing is the change email URL. And that's equal to the main URL plus this URL over here, or this endpoint over here. So let's copy that. And then I'm going to say data role change. So the data that is taken in that request. And you could see over here, it's this data right over here. So I'm going to copy that and put it right over here. So again, email address could be anything, it doesn't really matter, but role ID has to be set to 2. And this looks good. So now what's left is to perform our request. So we're going to say s.post, post because it's a post method. We're going to say the URL is change email URL, and I'm going to call this JSON because it is written in JSON form, and so we want it to appear in JSON form. So instead of saying data, we say JSON. And we set it to data role change. Again, set verify to be equal to false, and proxies to be equal to proxies. Okay, and then we're going to set the response to res. And we're going to say if the word admin is in the response. So if you could see the word admin, what we're looking for really over here is the admin panel. So if that's in the response, then print successfully changed the role ID, because we'll only see the admin panel if we were able to change the role ID to that of an administrator. Now, if we don't see the word admin, we're going to say else print could not change the role ID. And since I wasn't able to change the role ID, I'm just going to exit the program. And I'm noticing over here I forgot to exit the program as well. So sys.exit -1. All right, this looks good. Now over here, assuming that we do see the admin panel, that means we've successfully changed our role ID. The next step is to delete the Carlos user. So for that, it was a separate request. If we go back to proxy and look for our highlighted item, so this one right over here, and make that a little bit bigger, it was a GET request to this endpoint right over here. And since it's a GET request, it doesn't take any parameters in the body of the request. And so this request is a little bit easier to perform. So we're going to say delete Carlos user URL, and that's equal to URL plus the endpoint to delete the Carlos user, which is this one right over here. And then we just perform the GET request. We don't have any extra parameters in the body. So s.get, the URL is delete Carlos user URL, set verify to equal to false, and again, proxies to be equal to proxies. And this time around, we're going to say if r.status code is equal to 200, then print successfully deleted Carlos user. Otherwise, print could not delete Carlos user, and end the program. Okay, this looks good. So essentially, what this function is doing is it's performing 3 requests. The first one is to log in as the user that we were given. If we're able to successfully log in, then it attempts to change the user ID. If it can successfully change the user ID, or sorry, the role ID, then it attempts to delete the Carlos user. If it's able to delete the Carlos user, you'll get this message right over here. And if it can't delete the Carlos user, it'll tell you it couldn't delete the Carlos user, and it'll exit the script. So let's save that right over here. This looks good. Let's say file save. And let's go to terminal, new terminal. I'm still getting this right over here, so I'm not sure if it properly saved. And let's see if the lab timed out. And it did, so we're just gonna wait for it to load. Let's copy that, put it in here, remove the trailing slash and hit enter. Okay, so my guess is it did not save, and I'm not sure why. All right, so I had to pause a little bit and shut down Visual Studio and rerun it again because it was being a little bit glitchy. But it should be okay right now. It looks like it's saved. So let's say Python 3, access control lab 04, and again we need the URL of the application. I'm not sure if it timed out, so let's hit enter. And it didn't, so let's copy that and paste it and hit enter. Okay, so it looks like we've got an error with line number 5 over here. So URL lib3 disable warnings, not warning. So let's save that. Let's clear it and run it again to see if we have any other errors. Okay, so it says it could not log in as the user. And that's the nice thing about intercepting all the requests in Burp. We could see what it did. So you could see over here, there's 2 slashes. So / login, and that's why it wasn't able to reach this endpoint right over here. And that's my fault because I ran it with a trailing slash. So let's clear it and run it one more time with removing the slash. Hit enter. Okay, this is a good sign. It says it successfully logged in as the user, and then it changed the role ID and deleted the Carlos user. So if we look over here at all the requests it made, so this was the first request to log in as the user, and then the second request was this one right over here to change the email address. You could see over here we set it to 2 and it was successful, and then it attempted to delete the Carlos user. It got a 302. It followed the 302 to a 200 OK response, and so it printed out the message that it was able to successfully delete the Carlos user. Now if you go over here, you could see it says congratulations, you solved the lab. Alright, so we successfully completed the exercise by first manually exploiting the broken access control vulnerability, and then we scripted the exploit in Python. In the next labs, we'll look at more complex cases of broken access control vulnerabilities.